Hi, welcome to the show. You guys have seen us before. I'm Jack Berkowitz. I'm the Chief Data Officer of Security AI. We're a company that specializes in data security and AI security and governance, and super happy to be here today. Again, in our ongoing discussions with leaders, data leaders, analytics leaders throughout the community. Which with me today is Dimitrije Jankovic. Couldn't be more excited. I'm actually based in Atlanta, where it happens to be snowing today. Dimitri is based a little bit further north, but why don't I hand it over to Dimitri, let him introduce himself.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, or thanks for having me here today, Jack. And it's a little bit colder in Toronto these days, so we definitely envy you for the Atlanta weather. So I'm Dimitrije Jankovic. I head up digital strategy and operations over here at Sanofi. My organization really, at its core, looks to set the strategy for what we do in all things digital at Sanofi. Find the right partnerships to make that happen. Structure our portfolio and govern that portfolio in a way, because at Sanofi, digital is sort of operating across the full pharma value chain. So it sort of touches all different elements of our business, and then really nailing how we can actually use digital in our operations as an organization in of itself to streamline and optimize things with our vendors and all the way through the contracts that we have. So a pretty broad agenda, but an exciting time to have this kind of agenda in an organization that's all in on AI.
Yeah, and so before we dive into the AI thing, just remind everybody, Sanofi, right? We might hear the names, but a lot of us aren't in the pharma business or the medical business. I happen to be involved in a little bit, but maybe just real quick, what do you guys do? And, things like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So Sanofi is on this journey of chasing the miracles of science to improve people's lives. And at our core, what we're trying to do as a scientific organization is become a leader in immunology and really make sure that our impact to patients helps them solve some of those challenging health elements out there. Sanofi as an organization has been around for a while. We operate in vaccines, we operate in general medicine like insulin, but where we're really looking to double down and grow in our focus area is in the area of immunology. So Sanofi kind of operates all across the world. We deliver drugs to patients across the world, and so that adds its own level of opportunity, but also complexity in terms of operating in today's society.
Yeah, so let's dive in there, right? Before the call or before the recording, we were talking about, just 2 years ago, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, right? Everybody got excited, stunned, overwhelmed with generative AI. And here we are 2 years later, and Jensen Huang is now talking about agentic AI. And well, wait a second, what happened to generative AI and everything else? So talk to us about how you guys are looking at AI in general to fulfill your mission. And then maybe some of the challenges that you think you're going to either have seen or will see as you start to implement.
It's a great sort of question. So for us overall, our ambition is to kind of look at each and every step that we have along the way, from discovering a drug all the way through to making sure that that drug is developed in a safe and efficacious way, manufactured properly, supplied all the way through, and ultimately gets to patients in a more personalized way all the way through. And we're trying to basically use AI to cut that time in half. So however long it takes today, which is upwards of 10 years to go from actually identifying a drug candidate all the way through to getting it to a patient, we're trying to basically get these miracles to patients faster. And for us, what that actually means is that we're trying to embed AI in all different sorts of portions of our organization. The way we look at AI is kind of three folksy or rather simple ways. You have kind of expert AI, which is, if you think about it, that's the more specialized areas of AI that are really meant to help experts in terms of leapfrogging ahead in terms of how they do some of their operations. The most obvious ones for us, of course, will be in the areas of science. How can you use AI and give to scientists these tool sets to actually be able to do a ton more in terms of their analysis and in terms of how they do, let's say, hit selection and how they do drug discovery, essentially using AI. But you can also think about in the areas of, let's say, a manufacturing plant where you're trying to increase yield. Then we've got what we call snackable AI, which is AI at the concept being that AI is in the fingertips of every single individual and it helps them in their day-to-day operations. So the things that we used to do with budgeting, let's say in a conventional sense and follow sort of an annual process or a monthly process or whatever it might be, can we actually use all that data we have from the past, use some of our predictions for the future to have an AI augmented or AI generated version of it? And so the concept behind snackable AI is that it should be there to actually change the workflows and change the way that each and every one of us approach our data. And then last but not least, you called it out right. Gen AI has been all the buzz because at the end of the day, it's creating a new lever. For us, I think what's core about AI in of itself is a solid data strategy. And so for years, we had been investing in creating the right data foundations. And now that you're actually able to use those data foundations to power your AI, it's sort of creating that flywheel effect where people now understand why the data needs to be clean. Because at the end of the day, there is no data or there is no AI without data. From our perspective for Gen AI, we really tried to find different areas that we wanted to explore, but then really have big, bold ideas on where there's entire processes in our organization that can be completely reimagined with the use of Gen AI. And so rather than sort of looking at a ton of different small POCs and seeing what might be able to scale up, we actually picked some very, very meaty areas of the business where we said, okay, these processes take a certain amount of time to, if we were to actually reimagine that process totally from scratch with Gen AI, what would that look like? And so you're looking at areas in terms of content generation, because like I mentioned earlier, we operate in so many different markets. Generating medical information to
Yeah.
actually get that out there is huge, in making sure that all the checks and balances are in so that fundamentally people can understand what our medicines do and how they're different. It is a massive undertaking, or all the documentation that we need to generate. I mean, for every site, you've got a ton of different, every manufacturing site has a ton of different regulatory documents they need to generate. And so moving people away from just filling in blanks and generating documents to actually pulling insights from those documents and changing the way that they work is what we were after. And so our journey in Gen AI has been such that, we were finding those little areas that we can engage the masses. And so if you think of Gen AI as sort of a new source of light, rather than just thinking about who's got the best light bulb, we were kind of looking at, okay, how do you use this new source of light to change the way that you live your life? And so
Yeah.
I think agentic AI is just going to let us go with that further and embed more and more Gen AI into workflows and have those agents actually speaking to one another and then finding the right spots to have humans in the loop.
I love it because the way that first of all, I love the tiers of AI implementation you were talking about. I'm not sure anybody's ever put it that way, but it seems like a really great way to think about it. I also love the fact that you guys did a big, hairy goal, which is we're going to cut our time, we're going to cut our investment in half, right? It's not like we're going to get rid of it, but it's something that everybody, okay, I got this, right? And so wherever you happen to be in the business, you can just go into it. So let me ask you then, you brought up regulatory on the other side of it. And regulations about AI, regulations about when you can use it. We even see in Europe, right? The EU AI Act, California, Colorado, every country is going to have regulations. And then you also have new HIPAA regulations. You have new, FDA regulations. How do you bring your regulators, or how are you guys thinking about how do you reflect the regulations into your AI program? Maybe not bringing the regulators along, but more, how do you bring those regulations in to managing your AI program?
It's a great question. I mean, for us, this is something we thought about probably almost 2 years ago is when we started a program around it. And we were looking at it from the perspective of how do we make sure that we actually truly understand where the AI is being applied so that we can bring responsible AI at Sanofi to everyone. And so we ran with that acronym of RAISE, responsible AI at Sanofi to everyone. And it's kind of rooted in 5 different elements. One is that you're ultimately accountable to the outcome the AI makes. So whether you are the developer creating it or the person utilizing the AI insights, you as an individual are accountable to the outcomes. There's no one else who's accountable to the outcomes there. And if you start with that fundamental principle, then you can get into, okay, well, in that case, the AI needs to be transparent and explainable. It needs to be something that's eco-responsible. It needs to be something that's fair and ethical. It needs to be something that's robust and safe. And once we've had those tenets in there, then it was really about understanding, just like with any other technology, depending on the level of risk and where you're utilizing it in the business, right? Basically, what are then the technical controls, process controls, governance controls, and training controls that you need to put in place so that people can utilize the AI well. And so for us, it wasn't about creating something overly overbearing and sort of looking at blocking everything along the way, but truly being thoughtful about the risks that we're taking with AI, and then managing the level of oversight on it based on that level of risk. And so I think, the jury's still out in terms of how AI regulations are going to form, but between different sort of regulatory bodies, between different sorts of countries, you're going to start to see a pattern of whether you take more of a industry-based approach to the regulation, you take more of a geographic approach to the regulation. But the fundamental crux of it is that AI is going to be linked to the actual application or where it's being used, and that we should regulate it or treat the risks accordingly as such. And so that's the way that we've approached it. And if you look at our industry in of itself, I mean, the FDA just released, I believe, 3 or 4 days ago, some guidance on how AI is actually going to be used in the processes of clinical development and the approval of drugs. So you're starting to see the regulators move in and sort of embrace the opportunity while still managing the risks underlying it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It sounds like, Sanofi is really moving, I wouldn't say cautiously, aggressively, but with understanding the world that they're in as they do that, which is really great. Why don't we wrap it up right there? Because I think we really sort of covered it really well. And so I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I'm Jack Berkowitz. I work for Securiti AI. I'm the Chief Data Officer. With me today is Dimitrije Jankovic from Sanofi. We've been talking about, sort of how you deploy, sort of AI at scale across a company. And then also the implication of doing it in a responsible way, respectful of the regulations, but also the outputs and everything else that can happen. Securiti AI builds a platform that allows you to do these types of things by understanding your data, understanding the regulations, understanding your AI models, bringing it all together such that you can actually run a large scale system. So thank you very much, Dimitri. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Stay warm up in Toronto. I'm trying to stay warm here in Atlanta, and talk to you all next time.
Thanks, Chuck.